We've been told the same tired story for decades, that computers started in a garage in California in the 70s with a bunch of guys in turtlenecks. It's a lie. If you want to find the person who actually cracked the code, you have to go back way further. You have to go back to a time when cloud computing meant looking at the weather to see if your roof was going to leak. We're talking about Ada Lovelace. She didn't just understand the future, she invented the logic that runs your entire life today, and she did it while the rest of the world was still trying to figure out how to keep their fireplaces from exploding. Ada was born December 10, 1815. People were still riding horses to work and dying from a hangnail. There's no electricity, there's no light bulbs. If you wanted to see at night, you lit a stick on fire and hoped you didn't burn the house down. And into this world comes Ada. Now you can't talk about Ada without talking about her old man, Lord Byron. This guy, what a piece of work. He was the original bad boy of poetry. He was like a rock star, but instead of smashing guitars, he was smashing, well, everything else. He was moody, he was probably drunk half the time, and he was a total narcissist. He gets married to Ada's mom, Annabella Milbank, who thank goodness was a math genius. They called her the Princess of Parallelograms. Think about that marriage for a second. It is a total train wreck on paper. You have a guy who spends his nights drinking wine out of a human skull, literally. The guy had a skull cup and writing brooding poetry about how much his soul hurts. He marries a woman who probably tried to organize her spice rack by atomic weight. It's the ultimate collision of I feel versus I calculate. It lasted about a year before the whole thing imploded. Byron bailed when Ada was only 5 weeks old. He took off for Greece to play hero in a revolution, caught a fever in some swamp, and died without ever seeing her again. He left behind a mountain of debt, a scandalous reputation, and a daughter he barely knew. So Annabella's left with this kid, and she is terrified. She's looking at Ada's cradle like it's a ticking time bomb of poetry genes. She thinks if this kid reads one rhyming couplet, she's gonna end up in a ditch in Athens just like her father. So she decides to scrub the creativity out of her. She forces Ada into the math gauntlet. Most kids are learning how to tie their shoes. Ada is doing geometry and algebra for 12 hours a day. Her mom hired the most boring, stone-faced tutors in England to make sure she stayed grounded. But here's the thing about geniuses. You can't suppress them. It's like trying to put a lid on a volcano. Ada takes all that cold, hard logic and she mixes it with that wild Byron imagination. She called it poetical science, which is a fancy way of saying, I can see the math, but I can also see the soul behind the math. At 12 years old, she's obsessed with flying. 12! When I was 12, I was trying to figure out how to get a free soda out of a vending machine. She's studying bird anatomy. She's looking at the ratio of wingspan to body weight. She writes a book called Flyology, and she's trying to figure out how to put a steam engine on a mechanical bird. She was basically the Wright brothers 80 years before they even had a bicycle shop. But let's get to the meat of the story. When she's 18, she goes to one of those fancy Victorian parties, you know the ones where everyone stands around smelling like mothballs and damp wool. She meets this guy, Charles Babbage. Now, Babbage is a guy I can relate to. He's cranky. He's frustrated. He's a brilliant engineer who's constantly annoyed that the world is full of, well, idiots who can't add. Back then they used these big mathematical tables for navigation, but because they were calculated by hand, they were full of mistakes. Some guy gets tired, he forgets to carry a 4, and suddenly a British naval ship is at the bottom of the Atlantic, because the map was wrong. So Babbage is building this thing called the difference engine. It's this massive brass gear-driven monster. Ada sees it. She sees a friend. She's like, finally, someone who speaks my language. They start writing letters. And let me tell you, these letters are intense. They're talking about calculating engines and the law of operations. While everyone else in London is gossiping about who's wearing what at the opera, these two are basically inventing the digital age in their spare time. Now, here is where it gets crazy. Babbage comes up with a new design, the Analytical Engine. This is the one that really matters. The difference engine was just a calculator. But the Analytical Engine, this thing was a general-purpose machine. It had a memory. It had a processor. It used punch cards, the same ones they used for those fancy French looms to weave patterns into silk. Babbage is a hardware guy. He's obsessed with the gears. He's thinking, if I can just get the government to give me more money, I can build the biggest, baddest brass brain in history. But he's stuck in the numbers trap. He thinks the machine is just for arithmetic. This is where Ada steps in and moves the goalposts to another planet. An Italian mathematician wrote a paper on Babbage's machine in French. Ada translates it, but she doesn't just translate it. She adds her own notes. And these notes are 3 times longer than the original paper. It's like if I gave you a recipe for a grilled cheese sandwich, and you gave me back a 4-volume set on the history of dairy and the thermodynamics of bread. In these notes, specifically Note G, she writes out a sequence of instructions for the machine to calculate something called Bernoulli numbers. Now, I don't know what a Bernoulli number is. I assume it's something that makes your head hurt. But the point is, those instructions, that was a computer program. The machine didn't even exist. It was just a bunch of drawings and some half-finished brass parts in a workshop. But she was coding in her head. She was thinking about loops. She was thinking about conditional jumps. And here's the part that really makes her the hero of this story. She looks at Babbage and says, "Charles, you're thinking way too small. This isn't just for math. If we can represent anything as a symbol, music, letters, images, then this machine can process anything." She realized that a computer, a thing made of gears and steam, could eventually create art. She predicted that it could compose music of any degree of complexity or extent. Think about that. It's 1843. People are still using candles to see their dinner. And she's basically predicting Spotify and Photoshop. She saw the information age while everyone else was still worried about the price of coal. She understood software before anyone even knew what hardware was. But of course, because life isn't a movie, it didn't have a happy ending. The British government, the classic bureaucratic morons, they stopped the funding. They were like, why do we need a giant brass brain when we have plenty of underpaid clerks who can do the math for us? They couldn't see the vision. Ada's health started to fail. She was only in her 30s. She started getting into gambling, trying to use her math skills to win at the horse tracks. Which, honestly, I get it. If you're that much smarter than everyone else, you'd probably get bored too. She was trying to fund the machine. She was trying to build the future with horse racing money. That's a movie right there. She died in 1852, at the age of 36, the same age her father died. It's like the universe couldn't handle that much brainpower for more than 4 decades. For 100 years, her work sat in the shadows. People thought she was just a helper. They couldn't wrap their heads around the fact that a woman in the mid-1800s had already laid the foundation for the entire digital world. It wasn't until the 1940s and 50s, when the first actual computers were being built, that scientists looked back at her notes and realized she had already done it. Alan Turing, the man who broke the Enigma code, actually studied her work. So, here's the reality. Every time you open an app, every time you listen to a digital song, you are walking through a door that Ada Lovelace opened nearly 2 centuries ago. She wasn't just a mathematician. She was the first person to realize that the human mind could build a reflection of itself, out of logic and light. She saw the digital age coming while everyone else was still staring at the steam. She was the first programmer, the architect of the future. And it's about time we stop calling her a footnote and start calling her the founder.